Today we're diving into one of the most important skills in Standoff 2, peeking. We're going to break down the different types of peeks, when you should use them, how to avoid getting instantly wiped to the map, and most importantly, how to make sure you're the one doing the shooting instead of the one staring at the kill cam wondering what just happened. Because let's be honest, you've probably had that moment. You swing around a corner, take 2 steps, and you're back to spectating. And you're thinking, where was that guy? Well, there's a good chance the problem wasn't your aim. It was your peek. Peeking is all about positioning, timing, movement, and information. You're trying to see the enemy without giving them an easy shot at you. And once you understand that, your entire game can change. So let's start with one of the safest and most useful techniques. Short strafe peek. First up, we have the short strafe peek. It's quick, it's subtle, and it's perfect for gathering information without exposing yourself for too long. The basic idea is simple. You're near cover. You move out just enough to see what's happening, and then you quickly move back behind cover. You're not committing to a full fight. You're just asking a question. Is somebody there? You're potentially seeing an enemy with an AK. The important thing here is speed. Don't slowly walk out into the open and give your opponent 3 business days to line up a headshot. Move out, get the information you need, and move back. This is especially useful when you don't know where the enemy is. Let's say you're holding an angle and you suspect someone is behind a box. Instead of fully exposing yourself, use a short peek. You might catch a glimpse of the enemy. You might see their weapon. You might hear movement. Or you might confirm that the position is completely empty. And all of that information is valuable. Another advantage of the short peek is that it makes you harder to hit. You're only exposed for a brief moment. If your opponent is already aiming at the corner, they have a much smaller window to react. But remember, a short peek isn't automatically safe. If you repeat the exact same movement over and over, a good opponent will adapt. The first peek might surprise them. The second one might get their attention. By the third, they're probably already waiting for your head. So don't become predictable. Use short peeks to gather information, then change things up. Long strafe peek. Now let's talk about the opposite. The long strafe peek. This one is much more aggressive. Instead of quickly checking an angle and returning to cover, you're moving farther out and committing to the fight. This is where confidence, aim, and timing become extremely important. A long peek can be great when you already have an idea of where the enemy is. For example, maybe you spotted them during your short peek. Now you know they're holding the angle. Instead of repeatedly showing the exact same tiny portion of your body, you can make a wider movement and take the fight on your terms. The goal is to move far enough that you can actually engage the opponent effectively. But there's a huge downside. The longer you're exposed, the more time the enemy has to shoot you. It's basically standing in front of a target range and saying, all right, everybody gets one. That's why the long strafe peek works best when you have a reason to take the fight. Maybe you have full health. Maybe you have a strong rifle. Maybe you've already damaged the opponent. Maybe your teammate is ready to trade the kill. Those factors matter. You shouldn't use an aggressive peek just because you feel like it. Think about the situation first. If you're one shot away from dying, a long peek might be a terrible idea. But if you have full HP, a good weapon, and information about the enemy's position, that's a completely different situation. Shift peek. Next up is the shift peek. This is where things get sneaky. Very sneaky. Instead of rushing around the corner, you're moving slowly and quietly. The goal is to surprise your opponent before they realize you're there. Sound is incredibly important in competitive shooters. If you run everywhere, you're basically announcing, hello, I'm coming. With a shift peek, you're trying to keep your approach quiet. This can be especially useful when you're trying to take control of an important position. Maybe you know an enemy is nearby, but they don't know exactly where you are. Instead of sprinting toward them, you can move quietly into position. Then, when the moment is right, you take the fight. The shift peek can also be useful when you're low on health. If you don't have enough HP to survive a chaotic fight, you don't want to give away your position unnecessarily. Stay quiet. Stay patient. Make the enemy guess. And when they make a mistake, punish it. But there's one thing to remember. Being quiet doesn't make you invisible. Your opponent can still check the angle. They can still pre-aim. And they can still hear or see you if you make a mistake. So don't rely entirely on stealth. Use it as a tool. Running peek. And now, for people who don't believe in stealth, we have the running peek. This is the aggressive option. You run around the corner quickly and immediately take the fight. It's loud. It's fast. And when it works, it looks incredible. Running peeks can be especially effective in close-range situations. If your opponent is holding an angle and expecting someone to slowly walk into their crosshair, a fast movement can completely disrupt their timing. They have less time to react. You can also use running peeks when you're trying to catch someone off guard. Maybe you know they're reloading. Maybe they just fought your teammate. Maybe they're distracted. That's when an aggressive swing can work beautifully. But don't confuse aggression with randomness. Running around every corner without thinking isn't a strategy. It's a donation to the enemy team. Before you run out, ask yourself, where's the enemy? What weapon do they have? How much health do I have? Do I have a teammate nearby? And most importantly, what happens if I miss? If you have no answer to that question, maybe don't sprint into the open. Combining your peaks. Now here's where things get really interesting. The best players don't just use one type of peak. They combine them. You can start with a short peek to gather information. Maybe you see an enemy holding an angle. Instead of immediately swinging, you back off. Then you reposition. Maybe you use a shift peek to approach from a different angle. And once you have the advantage, you can suddenly switch into an aggressive running peek. Your opponent was expecting one thing. You gave them something completely different. That's how you keep people guessing. You could even short peek several times without shooting. Why? Because you're training the enemy to expect the same behavior. Then, when they start reacting automatically, that's when you change it. You can turn the situation around with a wider peek. This is basically a battle of expectations. Your opponent is trying to predict you. Your job is to make that prediction difficult. Don't just think, how do I kill this guy? Think, what does this guy think I'm going to do? And then do something else. Use your health and weapon. There's another huge factor people forget. Your health. If you're at full HP, you can afford to take more risks. If you're low HP, you need to be much more careful. Imagine you're at extremely low health and decide to challenge an enemy with a rifle. You swing wide. They hit you once. Game over. That wasn't necessarily an aim problem. It was a decision-making problem. When you're low HP, consider safer peaks. Use cover. Gather information. Try to force the enemy into an uncomfortable position. And don't give them a free fight. Your weapon matters too. Different weapons reward different situations. If you're holding a rifle and have plenty of space, you may be comfortable taking a longer range engagement. If you're using something better suited for close combat, you may want to force the fight into a tighter area. The important thing is to adapt. Don't use the exact same peak regardless of your health, weapon, position, and opponent. Good players adjust. Don't forget your team. Peaking isn't just about your individual fight. Team coordination can completely change how effective a peak is. For example, if your teammate is holding one angle, you can focus on another. That means the enemy has fewer safe ways to attack. You can also set up trades. If your teammate goes first and gets eliminated, you can immediately follow up and eliminate the enemy. That's much better than both of you standing behind the same wall arguing about who should peek. And please, don't block your teammate. Nothing is worse than trying to take a clean shot while your teammate is standing directly in front of you. Also watch out for crossfire. You might think you're safely moving into an angle, but if your teammate is positioned somewhere else, your movement could expose you to multiple enemies at once. Before you peek, know where your team is. Know where the enemy might be, and know where you can retreat. Peeker's advantage. Peeker's advantage in Standoff 2 is a small timing advantage that the player peeking or swinging around a corner can have over the player who is already holding that angle. This happens because of ping, server updates, and the time it takes for the game to send and display each player's position. For example, if you're holding an angle and an enemy quickly swings the corner, the enemy may appear on your screen slightly later than they actually became visible to themselves. This means the peeker can sometimes see you and start shooting before you have enough time to react, even though you were holding the angle first. Peeker's advantage is more noticeable when players have higher ping or when someone wide swings a corner at high speed. It doesn't mean the peeker will always win, but it can give them a small reaction time advantage. Because of this, good players often avoid standing directly on a predictable corner. Instead, they use off angles, jiggle peeks, counter-strafing, and repositioning to make themselves harder to pre-aim and reduce the effect of peeker's advantage. Final tips. Let's run through the key points. Short peek for information. Long peek when you're ready to commit. Shift peek when you want to stay quiet. Running peek when you want speed and aggression. And combining all of them, that's where you become unpredictable. Don't peek the same way every time. Don't stand exposed longer than necessary. Use cover. Pay attention to your health. Think about your weapon. Listen for enemy movement. And communicate with your team. Most importantly, don't let your peeking become automatic. Every corner is a decision. Ask yourself, what do I know? What don't I know? Where could the enemy be? What happens if I lose this fight? Those questions take less than a second once you get used to them. And that tiny bit of decision-making can be the difference between getting a clean headshot and watching the enemy's kill animation. Bonus tip, don't stick too close to the wall. Enemies can easily spot you and punish you for it. If you're constantly hugging the wall, you're basically exposing where you are and giving away when you're about to peek. Instead, create some distance, stay unpredictable, and avoid making your next move obvious. Your goal is to peek on your terms, not give the enemy a free kill before you even have a chance to react. There you go. These were all the tips you need to peek correctly. Don't forget to like and subscribe.